Some say rejection carves deeper wounds than silver, leaving scars that time cannot heal. For Alara Matthews, the half-blood Omega with no detectable scent, this truth burned through her veins as she fled into the storm-lashed mountains, tears blurring the treacherous road ahead. 5 years of devotion to Marcus, 5 years of believing his promises that her differences didn't matter, had shattered in an instant when his true mate appeared. "I'm sorry," he had said, his voice eerily calm as he ended their relationship. "But what we had was nice, as if her heart hadn't been ripped from her chest and offered as sacrifice to fate's cruel altar." The rain pounded against her windshield, matching the rhythm of her broken heart as she drove blindly upward, away from the whispers that had always followed her, away from a pack that tolerated but never accepted her, away from the bitter truth that in a world where true mates were revered above all else, she would always be second choice, disposable, replaceable. What Alara couldn't know as she navigated the winding mountain roads was that fate rarely follows expected paths, that sometimes rejection drives us precisely where we need to be, that the most powerful alpha in the Northern Territories, the man they called the Wolf Tamer, was about to find her on his doorstep, soaked to the bone, and unaware that her desperate escape was actually the beginning of something far more profound than the love she thought she'd lost. Before we begin, remember to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. Every day, a new story awaits you. Now, let us begin. Rain pounded against the windshield as Alara Matthews steered her ancient sedan through the winding mountain roads, her vision blurred, not from the torrential downpour, but from the tears that refused to stop flowing. The memory of Marcus's face, his expression of pity mixed with disgust, kept replaying in her mind like a cruel film. "I'm sorry, Alara," he had said, his voice eerily calm as he ended their 5-year relationship. "But Cassandra is my true mate. I felt it the moment I saw her. What we had was nice, but it wasn't real. Nice. 5 years of her life reduced to nice. 5 years of planning their future together, of believing his promises that they would be mated after she finished her degree, of allowing him to court her properly as tradition dictated. All of it meant nothing the moment he met a pure-blooded alpha female at some corporate function." A sob tore from Alara's throat as she remembered how quickly the pack had turned on her, how the whispers started immediately. The half-breed was never good enough for him anyway. Did you really think an alpha's son would settle for an omega with no scent? Her mother was human. What did she expect? Her knuckles whitened as she gripped the steering wheel. The road ahead became increasingly treacherous as she climbed higher into the mountains, away from the coastal town that had been her home for the past decade, away from the pack that had never truly accepted her. Lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating the dense forest on either side of the narrow road. Alara knew she should pull over, wait out the storm, but the thought of stopping, of being still with her thoughts, was unbearable. She needed distance. She needed escape. Her phone buzzed for the 20th time that evening. Without looking, she knew it would be her father, demanding she return home immediately. Or worse, it could be Lisa, her supposed best friend, who had offered nothing but platitudes when Marcus had publicly humiliated Alara at the pack gathering. "These things happen," Lisa had whispered, avoiding eye contact. "True mates are rare. You should be happy for him." Happy. As if she could be happy watching the man she loved choose someone else after a single meeting. As if she could be happy knowing that every sacrifice she'd made, every moment of vulnerability she'd shared, meant absolutely nothing compared to the mystical true mate bond that shifters revered above all else. The car swerved suddenly as Alara hit a slick patch of road. Her heart leaped into her throat as she fought to regain control, the tires skidding dangerously close to the edge of the cliff. With a desperate yank of the steering wheel, she managed to right the vehicle, pulling it to a shuddering stop on the narrow shoulder. Her breath came in rapid gasps as she rested her forehead against the wheel. "Get it together," she whispered to herself. "You can't die on this mountain because of him. He's not worth it." But the hollow ache in her chest suggested otherwise. Marcus had been her anchor in a world that had always viewed her as less than, half human, with no detectable scent that other shifters could read. Alara had always been an outsider, until Marcus had seen past all that, or so she thought. The rain intensified, drumming against the roof of the car like impatient fingers. Alara lifted her head, wiping roughly at her eyes. Through the curtain of water streaming down her windshield, she caught sight of a faint light in the distance. Squinting, she could make out what appeared to be a small cabin nestled among the trees. Shelter. Somewhere to wait out the storm, at least. With trembling hands, she restarted the car and carefully maneuvered it toward the light. As she drew closer, the cabin came into clearer view, rustic but well-maintained, with a covered porch and smoke curling from the chimney. Someone was home. Ilara hesitated. The last thing she wanted was company, especially a stranger who might ask questions she wasn't prepared to answer. But the alternative was spending the night in her car on a dangerous mountain road during a violent storm. Decision made, she parked beside what appeared to be a rugged, expensive SUV and dashed through the rain to the porch. Water soaked through her thin sweater, plastering her dark hair to her face and neck. She shivered, suddenly aware of how unprepared she was for this impromptu journey. In her haste to escape, she'd packed nothing but a small duffel bag with a few changes of clothes and her meager savings. Her hand froze mid-air as she went to knock. What was she doing? This was madness. She was about to disturb some random person in the middle of the night, in the middle of nowhere, because she couldn't handle a breakup. Maybe she should just go back. But back to what? To the pitying glances? To watching Marcus and Cassandra build the life that should have been hers? To her father's disappointment when he realized she wasn't good enough to secure a respectable match? Before she could spiral further, the door swung open, revealing a tall figure silhouetted against the warm glow from inside. "Are you planning to stand out there all night? Or were you going to knock at some point?" a deep voice asked, the words softened by a hint of amusement. Ilara stepped back instinctively, nearly slipping on the wet porch. A strong hand shot out, gripping her arm to steady her. The contact sent an unexpected jolt through her system, like static electricity but warmer, more intense. I'm sorry to bother you," she stammered, trying to make out the man's features in the shadows. "My car. The storm. I saw your light and thought that you'd rather not drive off a cliff in this weather? Seems reasonable." He stepped aside, opening the door wider. "Come in before you catch your death." The light from within illuminated him properly for the first time, and Ilara felt her breath catch. He was striking, not conventionally handsome, but commanding in a way that made it impossible to look away. His features were sharp, almost severe, prominent cheekbones, a strong jawline dusted with stubble, and eyes so dark they appeared black in the dim light. His hair, equally dark, was cut short on the sides but longer on top, currently mussed as if he'd been running his hands through it. But it wasn't his appearance that made Ilara freeze. It was the overwhelming presence he exuded, an aura of such raw power that her Omega instincts immediately recognized what her human senses couldn't detect. Alpha, and not just any alpha. This man's energy was unlike anything she'd ever encountered, even among the strongest leaders in her former pack. She should run. Every cell in her body screamed danger, warned her that she was vulnerable and alone with a predator far more dominant than any she'd encountered before. But where would she go? Back into the storm? "I don't bite," he said, his mouth quirking slightly. Unless provoked. Ilara swallowed hard, forcing herself to move forward into the warmth of the cabin. "Thank you," she managed. "I'll just wait until the storm passes and be on my way." The interior was surprisingly cozy, a stark contrast to the man himself. A fire crackled in a stone hearth, casting dancing shadows across comfortable, well-worn furniture. Bookshelves lined one wall, filled with leather-bound volumes. The space smelled of wood smoke, coffee, and something uniquely masculine that made Ilara's pulse quicken. "Take off that wet sweater before you freeze," he instructed, closing the door behind her. "I'll find you something dry." He disappeared down a hallway, leaving Ilara standing awkwardly in the middle of the room. She debated ignoring his command. She'd had enough of alphas giving her orders. But the logic was sound. Her teeth were already chattering, her clothes soaked through. She peeled off the damp sweater, leaving her in a thin camisole that was only marginally drier. Hugging herself for warmth, she moved closer to the fire, extending her hands toward the flames. "Here." She turned to find the man holding out a large flannel shirt. His eyes flickered briefly over her form before returning to her face with almost deliberate control. "Thank you," she said, accepting the offering and quickly pulling it on. The fabric was soft, well-worn, and carried that same intoxicating scent she'd noticed earlier. It enveloped her like a protective cocoon, simultaneously comforting and disconcerting. "I'm Alara," she offered, feeling the need to fill the silence as she rolled up the 2 long sleeves. "Dominic." He moved to a small kitchenette tucked into one corner of the cabin. "Coffee? Or something stronger?" "Coffee would be nice." Alara watched as he prepared 2 mugs, his movements efficient and precise. The shirt he wore stretched across broad shoulders as he reached for cups from a high cabinet. Despite his casual attire, dark jeans and a simple Henley, there was nothing relaxed about his bearing. Every movement spoke of contained power, of absolute control. "So, Alara," he said, handing her a steaming mug, "what brings you to these mountains in the middle of a storm? Running from something? Or someone?" The question, asked so directly, caught her off guard. She took a sip of coffee to buy time, wincing as the hot liquid burned her tongue. "I'm just passing through," she replied finally, avoiding his penetrating gaze. Dominic leaned against the counter, studying her over the rim of his mug. "Most people who are just passing through check the weather forecast first, and pack more than what I'm guessing is in that small bag you left in your car." Alara stiffened. "I don't see how that's any of your business." A smile played at the corners of his mouth, but it didn't reach his eyes. "It's not. But when a distressed Omega shows up on my doorstep in the middle of the night, my curiosity tends to get the better of me." "How did you—" Alara stopped herself, realization dawning. Of course he knew she was an Omega. Alphas could always tell, even without a scent to confirm it. It was in the way they carried themselves, in subtle biological markers that went beyond mere smell. "It doesn't matter. I'll be gone as soon as the rain stops." Dominic pushed away from the counter, moving to stand near the large window that overlooked the forest. Lightning illuminated the sky, followed almost immediately by a deafening crack of thunder that made Alara jump. "That won't be tonight," he stated, turning back to face her. "The storm's only getting worse. The road down the mountain will be impassable by now." Panic fluttered in Alara's chest. "I can't stay here. You don't have much choice." His tone was matter-of-fact, brooking no argument. "Unless you prefer taking your chances with the floodwaters and fallen trees." She set her mug down with more force than intended, coffee sloshing over the rim. "You don't understand. I need to keep moving. I need to get away from—" She cut herself off, pressing her lips together. "From the Alpha who hurt you?" Dominic supplied, his expression unreadable. Ilara's eyes widened. "How did you—" "Your eyes are swollen from crying. You're running away in the middle of the night with barely any possessions, and you flinch every time I move too quickly, as if expecting aggression." He took a step closer, his voice softening slightly. "It doesn't take a genius to put the pieces together." She looked away, embarrassed by how transparent her pain must be. "It's not what you think. He didn't hurt me. Not physically. Some wounds don't need to be physical to be devastating." Something in his tone made her look up, meeting his gaze directly for the first time. There was knowledge there, an understanding that suggested personal experience with the kind of pain she was feeling. The moment stretched between them, taut with unspoken recognition. Then Dominic broke the connection, moving toward a door near the back of the cabin. "You can take the bedroom," he said, his tone once again neutral. "I'll sleep out here." "I couldn't possibly—" "It's not up for debate." There was that alpha command again, reflexive and absolute. But then, as if catching himself, he added more gently, "Please, you need rest more than I do." Alara wanted to argue, to assert what little independence she had left, but exhaustion was rapidly overtaking her. The emotional toll of the day, combined with hours of driving through treacherous conditions, had left her drained. "Thank you," she conceded. "Just for tonight. I'll be gone in the morning." Dominic nodded, though something in his expression suggested he doubted her statement. "The bathroom's through there if you need it." He indicated a door adjacent to the bedroom. "There are extra blankets in the chest at the foot of the bed." Alara gathered her duffel from where she'd dropped it by the door and made her way to the bedroom. It was as warm and inviting as the rest of the cabin. A large bed with a handmade quilt, a sturdy dresser, and another bookshelf laden with well-read volumes. She wondered briefly who this man was, what he was doing alone in this remote location, and why he'd so readily offered shelter to a stranger. As she closed the door behind her, she heard his voice one last time, low and certain. "Running never solves anything, Alara. Whatever you're fleeing from will still be there tomorrow, no matter how far you drive." She leaned against the door, closing her eyes as fresh tears threatened. Because the worst part was, he was right. No matter how many miles she put between herself and her former pack, she couldn't escape the fundamental truth that had been reinforced today. In a world of fated mates and perfect matches, she would always be the one left behind. With a deep breath, she pushed away from the door and began preparing for bed. Tomorrow she would continue her journey, away from her past, away from this strangely perceptive alpha, and toward what? She had no destination in mind, no plan beyond escape. Outside, the storm raged on, mirroring the turmoil in her heart. But for tonight, at least, she had found shelter from the rain, if not from her thoughts. Ilara woke to the scent of coffee and something sweet baking. For a moment, disorientation clouded her mind as she stared at the unfamiliar ceiling. The events of the previous night crashed back. Marcus's rejection, her desperate flight, the storm, and the mysterious alpha who had offered her shelter. Dominic! She sat up, running a hand through her tangled hair. Sunlight streamed through the window, revealing a clear blue sky. The storm had passed, and with it, her excuse to remain sheltered in this cabin. After a quick trip to the bathroom, where she did her best to make herself presentable with limited resources, Ilara steeled herself to face her host. She'd thank him for his hospitality, get in her car, and continue, wherever she was going. The sight that greeted her when she opened the bedroom door was unexpected. Dominic stood at the stove, his back to her, flipping what appeared to be blueberry pancakes. He'd changed into fresh clothes, dark jeans and a forest green Henley that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders. "Good morning," he said without turning, somehow sensing her presence. "Sleep well?" "Yes, thank you," she replied, suddenly conscious of her rumpled appearance. She was still wearing his flannel shirt over her camisole and jeans. "The storm kept me up for a while, but the bed was comfortable." He glanced over his shoulder, those dark eyes assessing her briefly before returning to his task. "Hungry?" Her stomach answered before she could, growling audibly. A flush crept up her neck. "I should really get going. The roads are clear now, and I've imposed enough." Dominic slid a perfectly golden pancake onto a plate already stacked with several others. "The roads might be clear, but your car isn't going anywhere." "What? Why?" "Battery's dead. I checked this morning when I went to bring in your bag." Ilara's breath caught. "You went through my things?" "I didn't go through anything," he replied calmly, turning off the stove. "I noticed your bag was still in the car and brought it to the porch. When I tried to start your car to move it to a better spot, the battery was dead." He set the plate of pancakes on a small dining table, along with maple syrup and butter. "Sit, eat. We'll figure out your car afterward." It wasn't a request, and Ilara found herself complying despite her frustration. As she settled at the table, Dominic placed a mug of coffee in front of her, fixed exactly as she preferred, light with 1 sugar. She hadn't told him how she took her coffee. "How did you know?" she asked, gesturing to the mug. A small smile played at the corners of his mouth. Lucky guess. There was something almost predatory about that smile, a reminder that despite his hospitality, this man was a dominant alpha, one whose power radiated from him like heat from a fire. Ilara dropped her gaze, focusing on serving herself pancakes instead of dwelling on the strange flutter in her stomach. They ate in silence for a few minutes, the only sounds the clink of silverware and the occasional call of birds outside. Ilara couldn't remember the last time she'd had homemade pancakes this good. Certainly not recently. Marcus had always insisted they eat at the pack's communal breakfast on weekends, where the food was bland, but proper protocol was observed. "Your phone's been ringing," Dominic said, breaking into her thoughts. "All morning. Someone's determined to reach you." Ilara set down her fork. "Where is it?" "On the counter, charging. It died sometime during the night." She rose quickly, spotting her phone plugged into an outlet near the refrigerator. 17 missed calls, 10 voicemails, 23 text messages, all from her father, Lisa, and a number she recognized as belonging to the beta of her former pack, but none from Marcus. Of course not. Why would he care where she'd gone? He had his true mate now. "Bad news?" Dominic asked, watching her closely. "No, just people wondering where I am." She returned to the table, leaving the phone where it was. "Thank you for charging it." He nodded, taking a sip of his coffee. "Your father must be worried." Ilara's gaze snapped up. "How do you know it's my father calling?" "Your scent changed when you checked the phone. Grief, anger, and something else. The kind of hurt that only comes from family." He set his mug down carefully. Plus, you have his eyes. What are you talking about? Dominic leaned back in his chair, studying her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. Robert Matthews has very distinctive eyes, golden brown with a ring of amber around the pupil, like yours. The pancake in Alara's stomach turned to lead. You know my father? I know of him. He's the diplomatic liaison for the Coastal Alliance of Pax. Dominic's expression remained neutral, but something sharp had entered his gaze. Which makes you the half-blood daughter of Robert Matthews and his human mate, Helen, the one who disappeared after his mate's death. Alara pushed her plate away, appetite gone. You knew who I was last night. Not immediately, but once I got a good look at you, yes. Is that why you helped me? Because of who my father is? A flash of something, annoyance perhaps, crossed his features. I helped you because you were a lone Omega caught in a dangerous storm. Your lineage had nothing to do with it. She wasn't convinced. Her father's position made her a useful pawn in pack politics, despite her mixed blood status. It wouldn't be the first time someone had tried to use her to gain leverage. Who are you, really? She demanded, rising from her chair. What's an alpha doing alone in a cabin in the middle of nowhere? And don't tell me you just happened to recognize me from some pack gathering, because I've never seen you before. Dominic remained seated, apparently unfazed by her outburst. I'm exactly who I said I am. Dominic Blackwood. The name hit her like a physical blow. Blackwood, the ruling family of the Northern Territories, the most powerful werewolf alliance on the continent, and if rumor was to be believed, the most ruthless. You're the Alpha King, she whispered, taking an involuntary step back, the one they call the Wolf Tamer. A grimace passed over his face at the title. I prefer Dominic. Alara's mind raced. The Alpha King of the Northern Territories was notorious for his brutal efficiency in dealing with rogues and challengers. Stories of his strength and cunning were told in hushed whispers throughout the shifter world. Some said he could control other wolves with his mind. Others claimed he'd killed his own father to take the throne, and she'd spent the night in his cabin, alone, unprotected. Why didn't you tell me who you were? She asked, her voice barely audible. Dominic sighed, running a hand through his short hair. Would it have made a difference? You needed shelter, not a political introduction. Of course it would have made a difference. Your territory is at war with the Southern Pax. My father represents the Coastal Alliance, which has explicitly remained neutral in your conflict. Being here, with you, she cut herself off, the implications sinking in. He'll think I've defected. The conflict with the Southern Pax is hardly a war, Dominic corrected mildly. More of a territorial disagreement. And your father is too intelligent to jump to conclusions about your presence here. Alara laughed bitterly. You don't know my father. He sees betrayal everywhere since my mother died. She began pacing, panic building in her chest. I need to leave, now. With a dead car battery in the middle of the mountains? Dominic stood finally, his height making the cabin seem suddenly smaller. Be reasonable, Alara. Don't tell me to be reasonable. You've put me in an impossible position. I've done nothing of the sort. You drove to my territory of your own free will. You appeared on my doorstep seeking shelter. And now you're working yourself into a panic over political implications that don't exist. His voice remained calm, but an edge of alpha command had crept in, making Alara's Omega instincts urge her to submit, to calm down. She fought against it. Don't use that tone with me. I'm not one of your subjects. To her surprise, something like respect flickered in his dark eyes. No, you're not. But you are being irrational. Before she could retort, her phone rang again. The sound cut through the tension like a knife, drawing both their attention. Answer it, Dominic said quietly. Tell your father you're safe. That should be his primary concern, politics aside. Alara hesitated, then moved to retrieve the phone. Her father's name flashed on the screen, accompanied by a photo taken years ago, before grief had etched permanent lines into his face. Before disappointment had replaced affection in his eyes whenever he looked at her. Taking a deep breath, she answered, Hello, Father. Alara. His voice was sharp with relief and anger. Where the hell are you? I've been calling all night. I'm safe. I got caught in the storm and had to find shelter. She glanced at Dominic, who had moved to stand by the window, giving her the illusion of privacy while clearly still listening. Where? The pack has been searching everywhere for you. After what happened with Marcus. I don't want to talk about Marcus, she interrupted, a fresh wave of pain washing over her at the mention of his name. He's worried sick about you, Alara. We all are. Just tell me where you are, and I'll send someone to bring you home." The lie was so transparent it made her want to scream. Marcus wasn't worried. He was probably relieved she'd disappeared, saving him the awkwardness of seeing her around the pack territory. "I'm not coming home," she said, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. "I needed space, so I drove up to the mountains. My car battery died, but I'll get it fixed and be on my way." "The mountains?" Her father's voice changed, growing wary. "Which mountains exactly?" Alara closed her eyes, knowing the answer would only escalate the situation. "The northern range." Silence, then an explosive. "That's Blackwood territory. Have you lost your mind?" "Turn around immediately. If you're stopped by his patrols—" "It's a bit late for that warning," Dominic cut in, moving to stand beside Alara and speaking loudly enough to be heard through the phone. "Good morning, Robert. Your daughter is quite safe, I assure you." The silence that followed was deafening. When her father spoke again, his voice was ice. "Put my daughter on a video call. Now." Dominic raised an eyebrow at Alara, who reluctantly switched to video. Her father's face appeared on the screen, his expression a mask of barely controlled fury. "What have you done?" he demanded, though it wasn't clear if he was addressing her or Dominic. "Nothing that warrants that tone," Dominic replied, his own voice cooling considerably. "Your daughter sought shelter during the storm. I provided it. There's no political conspiracy at play." Robert Matthews's eyes narrowed. "Forgive me if I find it hard to believe the Alpha King happens to stumble upon my daughter by coincidence, just days after the Coastal Alliance's vote on whether to support your territorial claims." "Father, please," Alara interjected. It was exactly as he said. "I had no idea whose cabin this was until this morning." Her father's attention shifted to her, his expression softening slightly. "Come home, Alara. Whatever happened with Marcus, we can work through it. You belong with your pack." The words should have been comforting. Instead, they felt like chains. "My pack?" she echoed. "The same pack that's been whispering behind my back for years? That calls me half-breed when they think I can't hear? That looked at me with pity and relief when Marcus left me for his true mate? Alara, no." She shook her head, surprising herself with the conviction in her voice. "I'm not coming back. Not yet. I need time to figure out what I want." Her father's face hardened. "This isn't about what you want. It's about your responsibility to your family and your pack, especially now, with tensions so high." "That's enough," Dominic interrupted, his voice carrying the unmistakable weight of Alpha Command, even through the phone. "Your daughter is a grown woman, not a political asset. She'll return when she's ready, and not before." "You have no right—" "She's on my territory, under my protection," Dominic stated, each word deliberate and final. "She will come to no harm here. You have my word as Alpha King." The implications of that statement weren't lost on anyone. The Wolf Tamir was claiming temporary responsibility for Alara, a diplomatic gesture that couldn't be refused without grave insult. Her father's jaw worked as he visibly fought to control his temper. 3 days, he said finally. "I want her home in 3 days, or we'll consider this an act of aggression against the Coastal Alliance." Before either of them could respond, he ended the call. Alara lowered the phone slowly, her hands trembling. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "He had no right to threaten you like that." Dominic's expression was unreadable as he moved away from her, back toward the window. "Your father is worried. People say things they don't mean when they're afraid for those they love." "Love?" Alara gave a bitter laugh. "My father hasn't loved me since I failed to manifest a proper shifter scent. I'm an embarrassment to him. A half-human daughter who can't even secure a mating with a mid-level alpha, let alone someone worthy of our family's status." Dominic turned, studying her with those penetrating dark eyes. "Is that what you believe, or what you've been told to believe?" The question caught her off guard. "What do you mean?" "You carry yourself like someone who's been convinced of her own worthlessness," he said quietly. "But there's strength in you, Alara Matthews. I sensed it the moment you stepped into my cabin. The question is, when will you sense it in yourself?" Alara stared at him, unable to formulate a response. No one had ever spoken to her like this, as if they saw something in her that she couldn't see herself. Before she could gather her thoughts, Dominic was moving toward the door, grabbing a jacket from a hook on the wall. "Come on," he said, his tone shifting to something more practical. Let's see about fixing your car. You have decisions to make, and you can't make them standing in my kitchen." Alara hesitated only briefly before following him outside. The morning air was crisp and clean after the storm, the forest around them vibrant with renewed life. As she watched the Alpha King stride purposefully toward her dilapidated sedan, she couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted during their brief encounter, something that couldn't be undone. 3 days, her father had said. 3 days before this temporary sanctuary would become a diplomatic battlefield. 3 days to decide whether to return to the life she'd known, with all its limitations and disappointments, or to step into the unknown. 3 days to discover if Dominic Blackwood, the feared Alpha King, was the monster of legend or something else entirely, and why the thought of leaving his territory filled her with inexplicable dread. The car battery wasn't the only problem. As Dominic leaned over the engine of Alara's ancient sedan, his expression grew increasingly grim. "Your timing belt is hanging by a thread," he said, wiping his hands on a rag, "and your radiator has a crack. I'm surprised you made it up the mountain at all." Alara groaned, leaning against the car door. "How bad is it?" "Bad enough that you won't be driving anywhere for at least a week, maybe longer. Parts for this model will need to be special ordered." "A week?" A panic fluttered in her chest. "But my father will have to accept the situation." Dominic closed the hood with finality. "Unless you'd prefer I call in a helicopter to evacuate you from my dangerous territory." The sarcasm in his tone made her bristle. "Don't mock me, this isn't a joke." "No," he agreed, his expression softening slightly. "It's not. But neither is it the diplomatic crisis your father imagines." He gestured toward a path leading away from the cabin. "Walk with me." It wasn't quite a command, but Alara found herself following nonetheless, curiosity overriding her frustration. The path wound through towering pines, dappled sunlight breaking through the canopy above. After the rain, everything smelled intensely alive: rich earth, fragrant needles, and the clean mountain air. "My father won't wait a week," she said, after they'd walked in silence for several minutes. "He'll send someone for me." "He can try," Dominic replied mildly. "But entrance to my territory requires permission, especially this deep into the mountains. The roads are monitored, so I'm trapped here." He stopped abruptly, turning to face her. "Is that how you see it? As imprisonment?" Alara met his gaze, surprised by the intensity in his dark eyes. "I don't know how to see it. Yesterday I was running away from a broken heart. Today I'm caught in a territorial dispute between powerful alphas." "You're not caught in anything," Dominic said. "You're simply paused." "Paused?" He resumed walking, his pace slower now. "Sometimes the universe forces us to stop when we're heading in the wrong direction. It gives us time to reconsider our path." "That's very philosophical for someone known as the Wolf Tamer," Alara remarked dryly. A fleeting smile crossed his face. "Would you prefer I lived up to my reputation? Perhaps prowl around snarling and intimidating the local wildlife?" Despite herself, Alara laughed. "No, I suppose not." They emerged from the trees into a small clearing dominated by a crystal-clear lake. Mountains reflected perfectly on its surface, creating a mirror image so perfect it was hard to tell where reality ended and reflection began. "This is beautiful," Alara breathed, momentarily forgetting her troubles. "I come here to think," Dominic said, moving to sit on a large, flat rock near the water's edge. "When the responsibilities of leadership become overwhelming." Alara joined him, keeping a respectable distance. "Is that why you're here in this cabin instead of your territory's capital? To escape the pressure?" "Something like that." His gaze remained fixed on the distant mountains. "Leadership requires occasional solitude, time to hear one's own thoughts without the noise of advisors and courtiers." "I can understand that," Alara said softly, needing space to think. Dominic glanced at her, something unreadable in his expression. "Your father mentioned what happened with Marcus. He found his true mate?" The question reopened the wound she'd been trying to ignore. "Yes, a pure-blooded alpha female named Cassandra. 1 look and 5 years with me meant nothing. True mate bonds are rare," Dominic said. "Many go their entire lives without experiencing one." "Is that supposed to make me feel better?" Alara asked bitterly. "That I'm not special enough to be anyone's true mate? That's not what I meant, isn't it?" She stood abruptly, pacing along the shoreline. "All my life, I've been reminded of what I lack: a proper scent, pure blood, alpha qualities, and now, the ability to form a true mate bond." She laughed, the sound hollow even to her own ears. Marcus was settling for me. Everyone knew it but me. Dominic remained silent, watching her with those penetrating eyes. You know what the worst part is? Alara continued, unable to stop now that the floodgates had opened. I believed him when he said it didn't matter, that he loved me for who I was, not what I wasn't. She wrapped her arms around herself, fighting back tears. Stupid, right? To think someone could choose me when the universe offers them perfection? It's not stupid to believe in love, Dominic said quietly, only to mistake it for something less. Alara turned to face him, struck by the unexpected gentleness in his tone. What do you mean? True love is a choice, made every day in the face of imperfection and challenge. A true mate bond is different. It's instinct, biology, fate. His eyes held hers steadily. Both have value, but they aren't the same. You sound like you're speaking from experience. Something flickered in his expression. Pain, perhaps, or resignation. I've seen both kinds of connections, and I've seen how easily people confuse one for the other. Before Alara could press further, a low buzzing sound emanated from Dominic's pocket. He withdrew a sleek phone, glanced at the screen, and frowned. I need to take this, he said, rising from the rock. Feel free to stay here as long as you like. The path back to the cabin is clearly marked. He moved a short distance away, his back to her as he answered the call. Though he spoke quietly, Alara's enhanced hearing picked up fragments of the conversation. Already told you my decision. Not interested in negotiation. The Southern Pax will have to accept. Politics, then. The mysterious conflict her father had mentioned. Alara tuned out, respecting his privacy, and turning her attention back to the serene lake. What was she doing here? This detour, this pause, as Dominic had called it, wasn't part of her plan. She'd intended to put as much distance between herself and her former pack as possible, to find somewhere new where no one knew her as the half-breed who wasn't good enough to keep her mate. And yet, there was something strangely comforting about this place, about the straightforward way Dominic spoke to her. No pity, no condescension, just honest conversation. I apologize for the interruption, Dominic said, returning to her side. Pack business doesn't stop even when I'm supposed to be taking time away. It's fine, Alara assured him. I understand responsibilities don't disappear just because we want them to. He studied her for a moment, his expression thoughtful. No, they don't. But sometimes they can be shared, or delegated, or reimagined. He extended his hand to her. Come, there's something I want to show you before we head back. Hesitantly, Alara placed her hand in his. That same electric sensation she'd felt the previous night returned. A warm current that traveled up her arm and spread throughout her body. From Dominic's slight intake of breath, she knew he felt it too. He led her along the lake shore to where the clearing narrowed and the trees thinned. As they rounded a small peninsula, a breathtaking vista opened before them. The mountain range stretched out in all its majesty, valleys and peaks creating a patchwork of shadow and light. This is it, Dominic said softly. The heart of the Northern Territories. My responsibility, my burden, my joy. Alara stood beside him, momentarily speechless at the sheer beauty of the landscape. It's magnificent. Yes, he agreed, and worth protecting, worth fighting for. He turned to her, his gaze intense. Your father believes I'm attempting to expand my territory at the expense of the Southern Pax. That's why the Coastal Alliance's vote was so important, to determine whether they would support my claim or oppose it. Are you? Alara asked. Expanding your territory? I'm reclaiming what was stolen generations ago, Dominic corrected. Land that has always belonged to the Northern Pax, taken during a time of weakness and held illegitimately since. And you need this land? Even with all this, she gestured to the vast wilderness before them. Need? Dominic considered the question. Perhaps not in the way you mean, but the land I seek contains sacred sites important to my people's history and culture. And more practically, it includes several valleys with unique plants used in traditional medicines. Alara hadn't expected such a straightforward answer. The wolf tamer's reputation suggested ruthless ambition, not cultural preservation. My father believes you want to establish dominance over all the territories, she said carefully, that you're using this boundary dispute as a first step toward total control. Dominic's jaw tightened. Your father, like many others, finds it easier to believe in monsters than in principled leaders with different priorities. And what are your priorities, Alpha King? The formal title slipped out before she could stop it. He looked at her for a long moment, something shifting in his dark eyes. Peace, prosperity for my people, preservation of our traditions. His voice dropped lower. And lately, finding what I've been missing. The intensity in his gaze made Alara's heart race. She looked away, unsure how to respond to the sudden intimacy of the moment. We should head back, she said finally. It'll be dark soon. Dominic nodded, though something like disappointment flickered across his features. Of course. They walked in companionable silence, following the path back through the forest. As the cabin came into view, Alara noticed a sleek black SUV parked beside her own car. You have a visitor, she observed. Not a visitor, Dominic corrected, his expression hardening. My beta, Caleb. He wouldn't come unless it was urgent. A tall man with sandy hair stood on the porch, his posture military straight. When he caught sight of them emerging from the trees, his neutral expression gave way to surprise, then careful blankness. Alpha, he greeted, bowing his head respectfully. His gaze slid to Alara, assessing her with sharp blue eyes. I didn't realize you had company. Alara, this is Caleb Winters, my beta and right hand, Dominic said, his tone formal. Caleb, this is Alara Matthews. Recognition dawned on Caleb's face. Robert Matthews's daughter? The same, Dominic confirmed before Alara could speak. Her car broke down nearby during the storm. She'll be staying until repairs can be arranged. Caleb's expression remained carefully neutral, but Alara could sense his unease. I see. May I speak with you privately, Alpha? It's a matter of some urgency. Dominic nodded. Alara, would you mind giving us a moment? Of course, she replied, moving toward the cabin door. I'll wait inside. As she entered the cabin, she caught Caleb's voice, pitched low but audible to her enhanced hearing. Alpha, is this wise? With the vote so recently concluded? I know what I'm doing, Caleb, Dominic interrupted, his tone brooking no argument. Now, what was so urgent it couldn't wait until my return? Alara moved deeper into the cabin, away from the conversation. It wasn't her place to eavesdrop, no matter how curious she might be about the political situation she'd inadvertently stepped into. She busied herself in the kitchen, putting on coffee and tidying up their breakfast dishes. The domesticity of the task was oddly comforting after the emotional roller coaster of the past 24 hours. Nearly 30 minutes passed before the door opened again. Dominic entered alone, his expression grim. Everything all right? Alara asked, setting down the dish towel she'd been using. Nothing for you to worry about, he replied, though the tension in his shoulders suggested otherwise. Caleb is heading back to the capital. He'll arrange for a mechanic to come look at your car tomorrow. Thank you, Alara said, genuinely appreciative. And thank you for showing me the lake. It was exactly what I needed today. Dominic's expression softened slightly. I'm glad. He moved to the kitchen counter, accepting the mug of coffee she offered. Caleb brought some news I need to consider. Would you mind if we had a quiet evening? I have some thinking to do. Of course, Alara replied, trying to ignore the pang of disappointment. She'd grown oddly comfortable in his company, despite who he was. I have a book in my bag I've been meaning to finish anyway. Dominic nodded, his thoughts clearly elsewhere. He retreated to a small desk in the corner of the main room, spreading out papers Caleb had apparently brought. Alara settled on the couch with her novel, but found herself unable to focus on the words. Instead, her attention kept drifting to Dominic, watching the play of emotions across his face as he read whatever documents lay before him. The Wolf Tamar, the Alpha King, the most feared shifter in the Northern Territories. Yet here he was, frowning at papers and running a hand through his short hair in obvious frustration, looking remarkably human. As if sensing her gaze, he glanced up, catching her watching him. Instead of the irritation she expected, a small smile played at the corners of his mouth. See something interesting? He asked, his tone lighter than it had been since Caleb's arrival. Alara felt heat rise to her cheeks. Sorry. I was just thinking that you're nothing like the stories. Disappointed? His eyebrow arched in amusement. Relieved, she admitted honestly. I prefer you without the fangs and claws the legends describe. Dominic's smile widened, transforming his austere features into something genuinely warm. I save those for special occasions. The easy banter between them felt strangely natural, as if they'd known each other far longer than a day. Alara returned his smile, then forced herself to look back at her book, uncomfortably aware of how quickly she was becoming attached to this man this alpha, who represented everything she'd been running from. As night fell, and the cabin grew dark save for the lamps they'd lit, Alara found herself yawning. The emotional toll of the past 2 days was catching up with her. "You should get some rest," Dominic said, noticing her fatigue. "Take the bedroom again. I'll sleep out here." "I can't keep taking your bed," Alara protested. "The couch is fine for me." "The couch is too short for me," he countered reasonably. "And my mother raised me better than to make a guest sleep on it." Alara wanted to argue further, but another yawn overtook her. "All right, but only because I'm too tired to fight about it." As she gathered her things and headed toward the bedroom, Dominic's voice stopped her. "Alara." She turned, finding him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. "Yes? Whatever happens with your car, with your father, with everything else," he said carefully, "know that you're welcome here, for as long as you need." The sincerity in his voice made her throat tighten unexpectedly. "Thank you," she managed. "Good night, Dominic." "Good night, Alara." As she closed the bedroom door behind her, Alara leaned against it, her heart racing inexplicably. She'd known this man for barely a day, yet something about him called to her on a level she couldn't explain, something that made her feel simultaneously safer and more alive than she'd ever felt before. It was ridiculous, of course. He was the Alpha King, embroiled in territorial disputes and pack politics. She was a half-blood Omega with no status, no power, and apparently no future with the man she'd thought she would marry. Their paths had crossed by chance, nothing more. In a few days, her car would be fixed, and she would continue her journey. Somewhere, anywhere that wasn't here, where she was starting to feel things she had no business feeling for a man so far beyond her reach. Yet as she climbed into bed, breathing in the faint scent of pine and cedar that clung to the sheets, his scent, Alara couldn't help but wonder if their meeting had truly been chance, or something else entirely. Something like the fate that had drawn Marcus to Cassandra, unexpected and irresistible. She pushed the thought away firmly. She'd had enough of fate and its cruel tricks. Whatever this strange connection was between her and Dominic, it wasn't that. It couldn't be. With that resolution firmly in mind, she closed her eyes and drifted into sleep, unaware that in the other room, Dominic sat motionless at his desk, no longer seeing the papers before him, his thoughts entirely consumed by the woman sleeping just beyond the wall, and the impossible, undeniable truth he'd been fighting since the moment she'd appeared on his doorstep. Alara woke to the sound of voices, low, urgent, and unmistakably tense. She sat up, disoriented by the golden light streaming through unfamiliar curtains, before remembering where she was. Dominic's cabin. Her third day in the Alpha King's territory. The voices continued, now clearly recognizable as Dominic and his beta, Caleb. They weren't shouting, but the intensity carried through the wooden walls. "Confirmed it 3 times, Caleb was saying. "The Southern Alliance has mobilized forces along the border. They're claiming it's a routine training exercise, but our scouts report otherwise." "And the coastal packs?" Dominic's voice was measured, controlled, but Alara could hear the underlying tension. "Still officially neutral, but Robert Matthews has been seen meeting with Southern leaders, twice in the past 24 hours. Her father, negotiating with the Southern packs while she remained in Northern territory. The implications made her stomach twist. "You need to return to the capital," Caleb continued. "The council is demanding a formal response." "And the girl? Her name is Alara," Dominic interrupted, his tone hardening. "And she stays out of this. With all due respect, Alpha, she's Robert Matthews' daughter. Her presence here can't be coincidence, not with timing this convenient." Alara had heard enough. She threw off the covers and pulled on yesterday's clothes, not bothering with her appearance before yanking open the bedroom door. Both men turned to face her, their conversation abruptly silenced. Dominic stood by the fireplace, arms crossed, while Caleb occupied the same position as yesterday on the opposite side of the room. "I'm not a spy," Alara stated flatly, "and I'm not a political pawn. I'm just a woman with terrible timing and worse luck, so you can stop talking about me like I'm a security threat." Caleb had the grace to look slightly embarrassed, though his suspicion remained evident. Dominic's expression was unreadable, his dark eyes studying her with that same intensity that seemed to see through every defense. "I apologize for waking you," he said finally, "and for the nature of the conversation you overheard." "Don't apologize for him," Alara replied, nodding toward Caleb. "He's right to be suspicious. My father would absolutely use me if he thought it would gain him an advantage. She moved further into the room, squaring her shoulders. But he doesn't control me, and I'm not here as his agent. I believe you, Dominic said simply. I'll prepare some coffee, Caleb interjected, clearly uncomfortable with the exchange. He moved toward the kitchen area, giving them a moment of relative privacy. Is it true? Alara asked quietly. About my father meeting with the Southern Pax? Dominic nodded, his expression grim. It appears so. Then I should leave. Today. My presence here is only complicating matters. She ran a hand through her tangled hair, frustration building. I'll call for a rental car or a taxi, anything to get out of your territory before this situation escalates further. And go where? Dominic asked, his voice softening. Back to your father? To a pack that never truly accepted you? Or will you keep running with no destination in mind? The questions hit too close to home. That's not your concern. It became my concern the moment you arrived on my doorstep, he countered, moving closer. Alara, this conflict has been brewing for months. Your presence didn't cause it, and your departure won't resolve it. Before she could respond, a knock at the door interrupted them. Caleb moved swiftly to answer it, revealing a stocky, middle-aged man carrying a toolbox. Mornin', the newcomer greeted cheerfully. I'm Dale from Blackwater Auto. Hear about a car that needs fixin'? The assessment didn't take long, and the news was exactly what Alara had feared. Timing belt's shot, Dale announced, wiping grease from his hands. Radiator too, and your alternator's on its last legs. Truthfully, miss, this car's worth less than the repairs it needs. How long to fix it? She asked, dreading the answer. Parts'll take at least a week to arrive, maybe longer given how old this model is, then another day or two for the actual work. He glanced at Dominic. Unless the Alpha wants to prioritize it, of course. Standard procedure is fine, Dominic said neutrally. No special treatment necessary. Dale nodded. Right then. I'll take the car back to the shop, order the parts, and let you know when they arrive. He hesitated. Payment up front would be appreciated given the circumstances. Send the bill to my office, Dominic instructed, ignoring Alara's startled look. The pack will cover all expenses. As Dale prepared to tow her sedan, Caleb approached, his expression grave. Alpha, I've received word from the capital. The council insists on your immediate return. The situation has escalated. Dominic's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Very well. Make the arrangements. We'll leave within the hour. We? Alara echoed, glancing between the two men. You'll be coming with us, Dominic stated, his tone making it clear this wasn't a request. It's no longer safe for you to remain here alone, not with tensions rising. To your capital? Alarm coursed through her. But that will only fuel suspicions about my presence here. Less so than if you were discovered alone in my private retreat, he countered reasonably. At the capital, your presence can be officially documented and explained as a diplomatic courtesy to a stranded traveler. Fine, she conceded finally. But I want it clear that I'm not taking sides in this conflict. I'm simply accepting shelter until my car is repaired. Dominic nodded. That will be formally established. As Caleb departed to make the necessary arrangements and Dale finished connecting her car for towing, Alara found herself alone with Dominic once more. I never intended to drag you into pack politics, he said quietly, but the situation has left us with limited options. I understand, she replied, surprising herself with how much she meant it. You have responsibilities to your people. I won't make them more difficult. Something shifted in his expression, a softening around the eyes, a tension releasing in his jaw. Thank you. The simple gratitude in those two words made Alara's heart flutter inexplicably. 3 days ago, she would have laughed at the idea of understanding or sympathizing with the fearsome Alpha King. Now, she found herself seeing past the title to the man who carried its weight. I should pack my things, she said, suddenly needing distance from the intensity of his gaze. By the time she emerged with her small duffel bag, Caleb had returned, his efficient movements suggesting urgency. The convoy is ready, Alpha, he reported. 2 vehicles, full security detail. We've cleared the route to the capital. Convoy? Alara questioned. Is that really necessary? Standard protocol when the Alpha travels during times of heightened alert, Caleb explained. Nothing to worry about. Outside, 2 imposing black SUVs waited, each bearing the subtle insignia of the Northern Pack, a silver wolf with its head raised in profile. 4 guards stood at attention, their posture and alertness marking them as elite security. As she slid into the plush leather seat, Alara was struck by the surreal turn her life had taken. 3 days ago, she'd been fleeing heartbreak in a beat-up sedan. Now she was being escorted to the northern capital in the Alpha King's personal security detail. Dominic settled beside her, his presence filling the confines of the vehicle. "It's about a 2-hour drive," he informed her. "Caleb has arranged for quarters to be prepared for you upon our arrival." "Thank you," Alara replied, feeling oddly formal compared to the easy conversations they'd shared at the cabin. "I appreciate all the trouble you're going to." "It's no trouble," he assured her, his voice softening slightly. "Though I should warn you, the capital will be different from what you've experienced so far." "Different how?" His expression turned thoughtful. "The wolf-tamare you've heard about in stories, that's who I have to be there. The Alpha King can't afford to show the same flexibility as the man you met at the cabin." The admission carried a note of regret that tugged at something in Alara's chest. "I understand," she said quietly. "We all wear masks when duty requires it." Dominic studied her for a long moment, something unreadable flickering in his dark eyes. "Yes," he agreed finally, "but some masks become harder to remove the longer we wear them." The convoy began to move, tires crunching on the gravel driveway before finding purchase on the smooth mountain road. Alara watched through the tinted windows as the cabin receded into the distance. 30 minutes into their journey, Dominic's phone rang. His expression darkened as he listened to the caller. "When?" he asked, his voice shifting to the commanding tone she'd rarely heard during their time at the cabin. "How many?" Another pause. "Double the perimeter patrols. No engagement unless directly threatened." He ended the call, his jaw clenched tight. "What's happened?" Alara asked, concern overriding her hesitation. "Southern forces have crossed into the disputed territory," he replied grimly. "A training exercise that conveniently ignores established boundaries. Is it an invasion?" "Not technically. The area is contested. Both sides claim it." He glanced at her, his expression softening slightly. "But the timing is deliberate. A show of force while the Coastal Alliance debates whose claim to support. My father's meetings," Alara realized. "He's coordinating with them." Dominic didn't contradict her, which was confirmation enough. The knowledge stung more than she expected. Her father had always prioritized pack politics, but actively working against her while she was in Northern Territory felt like a betrayal she hadn't anticipated. "I'm sorry," Dominic said quietly, clearly reading her distress. "Family complications are difficult." Something in his tone suggested personal experience. "Do you have family?" she asked, realizing how little she knew about him beyond his title. A shadow passed over his features. "A younger sister. Our parents died when I was 22. I became alpha sooner than anyone expected." "That must have been hard," she offered, understanding better now the weight he carried. "It was necessary," he replied simply. Then, after a pause, "My sister Elena will likely be one of the first people you meet at the capital. She's protective." "Of you?" Alara couldn't help but smile at the thought of the fearsome Alpha King needing protection. "Of our family's reputation," he clarified, though a hint of amusement flickered in his eyes. "She takes her role as first sister very seriously. Should I be worried?" Dominic considered the question. "Be honest with her. Elena respects directness, even when she disagrees." The landscape outside was changing, forests giving way to rolling hills, dotted with small settlements. Each community they passed showed signs of Northern Pack influence, the distinctive architecture, the silver wolf emblem displayed prominently, the respectful way people paused as the Alpha's convoy passed. "Your territory is beautiful," Ilara commented, genuinely impressed by the prosperity evident even in the smallest villages. "It's taken years to rebuild," Dominic replied, pride evident in his voice. "When my father died, much of the Northern Alliance was struggling. Divided leadership, economic hardship, border disputes." His expression grew distant. "Uniting them wasn't easy." "The wolf tamer," Alara murmured, finally understanding the origin of the fearsome title. "A name given by my enemies," he confirmed, "but useful in its way. Fear can be as effective as respect, at least initially. And now? Now we have both," he said simply. "Most of my people understand that everything I've done, every difficult decision, every harsh judgment, has been to secure their future. The conviction in his voice made something shift in Alara's perception of him. This wasn't a power-hungry tyrant, as rumor had painted him. This was a leader who had inherited a broken alliance and forged it into something strong, whatever the personal cost. The disputed territory, she ventured. Is it truly about sacred sites and medicinal plants, as you said? Dominic glanced at her, surprise briefly crossing his features. You remembered. Of course. He nodded slowly. Those reasons are genuine. But there's more. He hesitated, as if weighing how much to share. The southern packs have been harassing smaller communities along the border for years, demanding tribute, restricting movement, occasionally abducting young shifters with promising abilities. That's horrible, Alara said, genuinely shocked. Her father had never mentioned any of this. It is, and it's why I've pushed to reclaim the territory, to create a buffer zone protecting those communities. His expression hardened. But the Southern Alliance has powerful allies and a persuasive propaganda machine. They've convinced many, including the coastal packs, that I'm the aggressor. The revelation threw everything Alara had heard about the conflict into a new light. If Dominic was telling the truth, and something in her core believed he was, then her father and the Coastal Alliance were supporting the wrong side. Before she could respond, the vehicle slowed, and Alara caught her first glimpse of the northern capital in the distance. Northaven rose from the valley floor like something from a fairy tale. Ancient stone buildings interspersed with modern structures, all arranged in concentric circles around a massive central complex. Welcome to Northaven, Dominic said, watching her reaction carefully. Home to over 50,000 shifters, and the administrative center of the Northern Alliance. It's beautiful, Alara breathed, genuinely impressed by the harmonious blend of old and new. As their convoy approached the city, people stopped to watch, many bowing respectfully as they recognized the Alpha's vehicles. The atmosphere shifted the closer they got to the central complex. Guards appeared more frequently, security checkpoints became more elaborate, and the deference shown by passers-by deepened. When they finally passed through massive wrought iron gates into a courtyard of polished stone, Alara felt as though she'd crossed a threshold into another world. The Alpha's residence loomed before them, a sprawling, elegant structure that radiated age and authority. Ready? Dominic asked quietly as the vehicles came to a stop. Alara met his gaze, finding both concern and something warmer in his dark eyes. As ready as I'll ever be. He nodded, offering a small smile that seemed meant only for her. Remember, no matter what happens in there, what you see or hear, you're under my protection. No harm will come to you while you're in my territory. The promise carried weight beyond the words themselves, a personal vow rather than a diplomatic assurance. Alara nodded, drawing a deep breath as Caleb opened the door, allowing the first glimpse of her new reality to unfold. The Alpha King had brought her home. Now she would discover exactly what that meant. If you enjoyed this story, a like or comment really helps. And if you wish to hear more tales like this one, make sure you subscribe so you never miss the next tale.